Some of the things that I've learned and lessons gained from attempting a trucking business, the mistakes I made, so that if you're interested, you don't make the same. Let's dive into it. All right, we are back with another episode of Let's Talk Trades. I am your host, Jonte Hawkins, and today I wanted to touch on a topic that is gaining a lot of traction in social media. I follow a lot of people who are into trucking, whether it be dump trucks, box trucks, over the road, and I have a lot of experience in it. And it's one of the companies that I had that I wound up closing. So I'm going to talk about the lessons learned and the mistakes that I made so that anyone who's interested in getting into the trucking business won't make the same mistakes that I did. So let's dive into it. So one of the things that happened to me and when it involves trucking was that I didn't plan on getting into trucking. It kind of fell into my lap because of what I was doing. So let's start to the beginning of it. And I'm a licensed contractor and I was running my business. I was doing government work as far as the state and the feds. And one of the things that I was doing was building wheelchair ramps, ADA upfits for homes for the state of North Carolina. And back then, the wheelchair ramps were made of wood. They were similar to a wooden deck. So they were overbuilt. And it just so happened that I had so many contracts that I was able to purchase a 1-ton flatbed. So it was a 1-ton dually flatbed, 5-speed, and I would use that to haul material so I can get everything at once. Don't have to worry about delivery fees. And I can use that also on other aspects of my construction business. So I purchased this truck and I was using it to haul material, pick up wood, things of that nature. And it just so happened that I had a job that was closer to the Virginia border. So if you know where Carr Lake is, Carr Lake actually borders North Carolina and Virginia. So it's both parts. And it was a job up that way. And it just so happens that instead of getting my material in North Carolina, I decided to travel to South Hill, Virginia. And it was closer to get my material in South Hill, Virginia than it was to go in the other direction. And I went to South Hill, Virginia, and I was coming out of the big box store and my truck ran out of gas. So I was right at the exit of the big box store, loaded, and I noticed my tank was still at half a tank, but I was out of gas. So I looked, and across the street, there was a parts store and a gas station. So I said I was gonna, run over. There was still room for cars to pass and trucks to pass. So I left the flashers on and went across the street, got a gas can and filled it up with gas. And I was walking back. And on the way back, I saw flashing lights. And I got there, and half of South Hill Police Department was sitting around. And I walked up to them and told them that was my truck and that I ran out of gas. And they were laughing because someone had called them and said it was a tractor and trailer abandoned on the road. We had a good laugh, and I showed them that the my needle was still showing half a tank, and and it was out of gas. So I filled the tank with what I had, and it fired right up, so I can drive across the street and just get some more gas and fill up and get back to North Carolina. But I received a ticket. So I received a ticket from South Hill, and what they told me was, using a commercial vehicle across state lines without a DOT number and a motor carrier number. And what they told me to do was to just go ahead and apply for your DOT number, get your DOT number, and it'll be dismissed. So that's what I did. Before the court date, I made sure I had my DOT number, and I also had a motor carrier number. I did all of the information under my LLC to make sure it was legit. And sure enough, the case was dismissed. So now I have my US DOT number on my 1-ton dually. That's it. And I get a call from the North Carolina Highway Patrol. The North Carolina Highway Patrol says, "You Mr. Hawkins?" I said, "Yes." "Hawkins Maintenance Services LLC, US DOT number and your motor carrier number?" I said, "Yes." He said, "It's time for your safety audit." It's like, "Sir, safety audit?" only have a 1 ton dually. He said, yeah, but you're a trucking company now. Okay. Well, I have a home office. He said, well, we'll be there for a safety audit. And sure enough, the North Carolina Highway Patrol showed up, did the safety audit. I told him about the backstory of the 1 ton dually and me going into Virginia. And, he had a good laugh. And he asked me, had I ever thought about doing government contracts? I said, well, I'm already set up in the system. He said, even better. There are jobs that most dump trucks can't do because they're too large, and the state bids all of this stuff. There are, smaller projects that require smaller trucks. So I started looking into it, and that's how I started working with the North Carolina DOT. So I worked with the DOT. I got all of my minority certifications. I worked with the Small Business Administration to work with the minority certifications. And because I was a licensed contractor as well as a hauler, I was able to bid and get certified in a lot of different projects, such as concrete, curb and gutter, sidewalk, demolition, clearing, and I had all of the equipment to get all of that stuff done. So that's how I got into the North Carolina DOT doing projects, and it was very lucrative, to be 100% honest with you. So much so that I was able to purchase my first dump truck, which was a Western Star quad axle dump truck, and I paid cash for it. And I had one of the experienced guys in my area, Charles Shaw. I talked to him, and he had dump trucks for a long time. And I asked for his advice and if he would ride with me to take a look at this dump truck. And he rode with me to Virginia. He looked it over, we drove it, and he said, it's a good deal. So I purchased it. So that was my first dump truck. And at the same time, my cousin in Baltimore had a dump truck that he had just purchased, and he was looking to get on the road. So there was no issues. I bring it down, we'll set something up, and I can get both of them under contract. So we were able to get both trucks under contract, and I had to start under another trucking company. So I was driving under another trucking company, and that was one of my biggest mistakes, starting with driving your own truck. If at all possible, drive your own truck. So at the time, like I said, I was working full time, and I was still running my business. So I was running my construction business and at the same time lining up work for the dump trucks. And I think if I had driven my own truck, I would probably still be in business. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't have the time to do it. So I hired drivers for both trucks, and we started with asphalt with a asphalt company in the area, and they used our minority certifications to gain federal contracts. So I know everyone here knows that, political situation and everything has changed now. But back then, the issues were they had minimum requirements for minority certifications. So much, a certain percentage of each state contract and federal contract had to have minority companies to work with. So I had my minority certifications, and the company that we worked with included our minority certifications in their contract so they could meet that quota. So with that being said, we used the 2 dump trucks for asphalt for DOT highway projects. And again, it was fairly lucrative. But one of the things that I didn't take into account was something for other drivers. So other drivers in your vehicles are not going to take care of them the way that you would. So that's probably the biggest thing that set me back was drivers. So the biggest thing that set me back was not having enough reserve in my trucking company to take care of any types of repairs that I had to make for the dump trucks. So my first year in, a few months in, my cousin's truck went down, and it just so happened that I had a good mechanic that could fix everything at a reasonable price. And I was able to get his truck back up and running, but I had fronted all of that money to get his truck up and running. And once we got his truck up and running, it started to make money. But my truck went down. So my truck made it through that first season. It had a blown head gasket. So with that being said, we were able to finish the season. And I say season because in North Carolina, we have winter. So if you're doing any DOT projects, if you have asphalt on the roads, they normally stop November, December. So there's a three to 4 month span where your trucks aren't running unless they're doing year-round work. So that's when work gets scarce. So if you have the opportunity, you can have your trucks go further south or pull your trucks into construction or do dirt work with construction companies. There are options for you to do to keep your trucks moving, but they got to keep moving. So what happened was we came to the end of the asphalt season and I did have enough money to sit my truck down. So I was able to sit my truck down, do a full in-frame rebuild where they rebuild the engine inside the truck, which is why it's called in-frame. And I had the heads done, new head gasket, trucks running 100%. So we get back into the spring, February, March. And again, I'm not driving the truck. And my driver that was originally driving the truck got himself in some trouble. So he could not drive for me in the spring. So I hired another driver. This driver, Class A driver, drove over the road. I went out on the road with him before I hired him. And, he proved proficiency in the truck. He went through the gears. He was top notch. And so I let him, be the driver for the first of the season. Once everything got started for asphalt, I let him drive. And sure enough, maybe 3 months into the season, my transmission shot. Now, mind you, I spent maybe $20,000 to rebuild the engine because I had a blown head gasket. And so that left my reserves tapped out. Luckily, I paid cash for the truck, so I didn't have any payments or anything on the truck because I would have had to go bankrupt, be 100% honest with you. And I was able to fund the in-frame based off the revenue that I made off the truck during the year. So when the transmission went, that was another, I think I spent all around 14 grand to get the transmission back up and running. So again, who you have in your truck is critical. Also, reserve. Save as much as possible for the rainy days. Because again, like I said, we don't run year round in the state of North Carolina. So that is something you need to be mindful of. That was another thing that I learned was to make sure you have some reserve if at all possible. So I had to set my truck down again during the season, meaning I'm not making any money and I'm paying money to get the transmission rebuilt. So once the transmission is rebuilt, we were close to the end of the season. I think we were right at the end of September, October, and I was able to run. And I had an issue with the asphalt company here. So one of the things that you have to do with these companies, you turn in your slips and you do all of the things to get paid when you send out your billing. And I sent out my billing and it was maybe a month and a half and I hadn't received payment. So I talked to them, let them know, I'm like, hey, my trucks are out there. We haven't received any payment. And I wanted to see what was going on. So you turn your slips into someone else and the site manager sends the slips to corporate. Their corporate office was in another part of North Carolina, and they process the payments in the form of checks. So I didn't receive anything for a few weeks. And again, I'm floating all of this stuff, paying my guys. At the time, diesel had gotten to about $5 a gallon. So if we were running day and night, my fleet bill, I had fuel cards in my vehicle so the guys can, get their diesel when they need it. My fleet bill at 1 month was $15,000. So I'm spending close to $15,000 a month in fuel. I'm in the hole because I pulled money from my construction company to pay for this transmission. And I'm trying to recoup some money. And it had gotten to the point where I wasn't making any money with asphalt. So I started to reach out. And at this time, I'm 2 or 3 years in. Everyone knows my trucks. They know I'm pretty reliable. And I was able to link up with a guy from Raleigh. And we started. He does a lot of construction work, so it's year round. Dirt hauls, rock, broken up concrete, things of that nature. So I was able to stay running for a good amount of time. I started to recoup some of my money, and at the time, my Western Star, was in Raleigh, and we're on Capitol Boulevard. If you know Raleigh, Capitol Boulevard is the largest thoroughfare in Raleigh. It takes you from the line all the way into downtown. And my truck had broken down on Capitol Boulevard. And if you know, I said I had a quad axle, one of the biggest trucks out there. And I had to call a tow truck company to tow me from the intersection on Capitol Boulevard to the guy that I was working with. He had a shop and he had a mechanic. So I had him tow it there. And it was maybe 2 blocks away. The tow company charged me $800 to tow maybe 2 miles, not even 2 miles, maybe a mile and a half. So again, I'm still working out, still working through this stuff. And like I said, this guy that destroyed my transmission, I had to let him go, right? Because it was 100% driver error that destroyed the transmission in my truck. So at the time, my guy that had gotten into trouble was he'd gotten his driving privileges back. So I hired him back. He was reliable, and he started driving my truck again. And I had another guy in my cousin's truck who I found out was stealing money using my fleet cards without my knowledge. I checked my invoices before I paid them, and that's what was happening. So I had to let him go, and I couldn't find anyone to stay in that other truck. So we were using as much as we can, and at the time, everything started to slow up. We were having rainy weeks, rainy days, and construction wasn't doing much. And again, fleet bills, $5 gas, and what happened was my driver got injured for this. He got injured very badly to the point where he wouldn't be able to drive again. So my truck was sitting. I was trying to put someone in it, and it had gotten to the point where I couldn't find reliable drivers. I was paying top pay, and it just didn't work out. And another thing that came into consideration was the amount of money that I was spending on insurance. My insurance rates were ridiculous. So I'm a licensed GC. I always carried $1 million commercial general liability for my business. And I also carried workers' comp in the amount of $60,000. But when I purchased the pickup trucks, the company that I was contracted with, they had separate requirements for the vehicles. So the dump trucks, I had to carry a $2 million commercial auto policy, and I had to bump my commercial general liability up to $2 million. So I was spending, I think, close to $2,000 a month just in insurance policies. So that was another, expense that was ridiculously expensive, but it was a requirement to work for that company. So again, I pulled away from that company and I bumped my commercial auto back down to $1 million, but still, it was a very costly expense. And it's one that a lot of people don't think about when they go into the trucking industry. So again, I had dump trucks. So I didn't have box trucks or go over the road. So I had the dump trucks and I had my 1 ton that I was using for hauling my material under the motor carrier number and my USDOT number. So with that being said, it's definitely another expense that you need to take into consideration because it was something that you still had to pay whether your trucks were running or not. So, there's a lot of things that we need to take into consideration. And again, that's one of them. The final nail in the coffin with my trucking actually didn't have anything to do with trucking. So, like I said, both trucks were down. We had raining season. And at the time, I was working full time. My construction company was running full time and the trucks were sitting. And what happened was the state pays once a month. So I was using the money from construction to float the trucks. And the contracts that I was doing, we were turning them over so fast that we had I had accounts payable close to $60,000 before I was getting paid. So the contracts, you have to pay for everything up front. and you submit to the state and you're reimbursed. So I was paying my guys, I was paying material, I was doing everything out of pocket up front, and the state would reimburse me, and they were paying once a month. And there were times where that check from a previous contract didn't come in. And it had gotten to the point where, like I said, my accounts payable had gotten up to close to $60,000. And I was using my personal money from my full time job to float my guys' payroll and the insurance and everything for the trucks. And it just got to the point where I said I had to weigh my options. And it had gotten to the point where it was just enough. So I had already made the decision that I was going to stop trucking, and I put my truck up for sale. And I did end up selling the truck. My cousin came and got his truck, and I think he sold his also. And, that was my experience with dump trucking. Would I get back into it? Maybe. If one thing I know for sure is that I would drive my own truck. That's 100% fact. So if I was to get another truck, it wouldn't be full time or be something, after I retire to keep me a little busy or something like that. But with the amount of people that I had as employees who didn't respect my truck or was, dishonest and things of that nature, I wouldn't trust anyone else to handle that type of equipment that I own. So again, to summarize some of the mistakes that I made so that you don't make them, if you're thinking about getting into trucking or dump trucks or over the road, or you're already doing it, those are some of the things that hindered me and caused me to decide to leave it alone and sell my truck. Make sure you first off have a reliable mechanic. That's something that is definitely crucial. And I was lucky enough to have quite a few mechanics that I can call to make repairs. And I made repairs myself. And there were times where I was out there at 11:30 at night making repairs, so it'll be up and running in the morning. Make sure you have reserves, because in North Carolina, when it comes to dump trucks, you may have a few months where you're not running anything. Also, take the fuel and the insurance, tires, all that stuff into consideration before you decide to jump into the business. And be prepared. You're something's going to happen, which is why I tell you to keep those reserves. This we always talk about the success stories and things of that nature, but we don't see too many people talk about the learning experiences or the failures that they've encountered in the business. So that is something that I wanted to do and get this information out. So as always, if you have any questions, concerns, feel free to reach out to me at jonte@letstalktrades.com. Again, like, comment, subscribe, share the information, and let's talk about it.